All right, everybody. Howdy ho, and welcome back. It is indeed time for Casino Companions. All right, the YouTube, whatever you want to call us, channel where we hang out and talk about what it's like to be a person who goes to casinos but doesn't actually gamble very much. So we're usually there to support our companions. That's why we're called the companions. All right, so um, we're back, and of course, do feel free to drop me emails, guys. I don't mind. Um, yeah, don't send me junk, but casinocompanions@gmail.com. You can also find me on Facebook. Not that I post much there, but it's there. There's some links up there and stuff that might be useful to you. Now, um, today, it's going to be a fairly, I don't know, different episode. So let's lead off with our kind of usual thing. Let's talk about the word of the day. Okay, so that's going to be the cage. All right. So what is the cage? All right, and you'll hear a reference to it. Sometimes you hear it talked about in casino movies, um, and you may be told, your companion may say, "Meet me by the cage." All right, what the heck are they talking about? All right, is there like this? You might be thinking of, like one of those '80s cage things dangles over the floor where they have go-go dancers. I don't know, something like that. Um, no, that's not a cage, by the way. I mean, it is a cage, but it's not the cage. So what are we talking about when we talk about the cage? All right, and the cage is a slang term for the cashier. All right, so in any casino, well, at least most casinos, uh, you'll find a place in the casino. Usually it's on the outskirts. And there may be more, if it's a very large casino, there might be more than one. So you got to be careful here, guys. Somebody tells you to meet by the cage, make sure you know there's only one. Um, so this will be on the outskirts of the casino. All right. So um, somewhere on the edges, you're going to find a place. Often it'll be labeled cashier. All right. So they don't call it the cage formally. It'll be called the cashier. And you will go there and you'll immediately notice that it's kind of like most of them are set up kind of like the old school banks. If you ever happen to go into one of those, or if you saw one in a Western movie, it's literally a counter, but it will be surrounded by a literal cage. It might be made out of plexiglass nowadays, but sometimes, especially the older casinos, it actually does look just like a cage, and it's surrounded by bars, just like a cage. Um, so the main purpose of going there would be to actually get money one way or the other. So usually you're going there to convert either slot tickets or table game chips back into real money. Uh, so that's one thing you would go there for. Um, some people go there to get loans from the casino to get what's called a marker. We'll come back to those someday. So you can do that as well. So there's various things you can do at a cashier. Um, for the most part, it's a place that you're only going to go to if you have a need to for some sort of cash transaction. Um, I would advise don't hang around a cage because you look suspicious. Duh. It's kind of like, why would you hang out in the lobby of your bank if you didn't have a reason to? All right. So, um, but just in case, um, and there have been times, guys, where as a companion, it frequently happens that you're the person who kind of gets uh, delegated to, because you're not doing anything, you're the person delegated to take all sort of the extra slot tickets, the ones that are like 50 cents and 30 cents. And you'll be the one they hand you this pile of, your companion hands you this pile of slot tickets, um, which in grand total might be actually be like $5 or $6. It's worth it. So it's money, but you'll be the one that's delegated to go and go to the cashier to hand in all these tickets to get actual money. Uh, now, which is cool. They may ask for your ID, by the way. That's kind of standard in casinos. So, but then that's okay. All right. And um, what else to say about that? I had a thought. Oh, um, nowadays, I mean, cashier used to be the only way, the cage used to be the only way to do these kind of transactions. Nowadays, not so much. All right. So it used to be, yeah, long lines of cashier, and they used to have like 20 people working at the desk. Uh, Kind of like the old banks where you had so many people working. Not it's just like banks nowadays. There's no need to do most transactions. You don't need to go to the cage because you would use those machines that we talked about a while ago, the ATM style machines that are actually on the casino floor nowadays. They do the same thing. All right, they'll cash in your slot tickets. They can't do chips. All right, so if you're still dealing with table game chips, you still have to go to a cage, but they will handle pretty much all the other stuff. So most people don't even go to a cashier anymore. They go straight. They go within the casino, save themselves some steps. All right. So, anyways, that's the cage. Now, ordinarily, guys, we would now switch over and start talking about, casino investing in casino stocks. I'm going to hold off on that this week. Um, I mean, of course, you may be seeing this, years in the future. So I don't know when you're going to see this. Right now, we're still in COVID, according to my real time frame. And casino stocks have been on a tear, which is great because I own shares. But they've been on a tear largely because of the perception. In fact, let's talk about that for a second, guys. So back to Investing Corner. It's back in. So if you're going to invest in stocks, all right, especially casino stocks, all right, and you're going to buy into, of course, when you buy, what are you getting? The answer is you're getting an ownership in the company you're buying. All right, you literally own a piece of the company. All right, you're now part of the ownership. Now, yes, I often kind of laugh because I own Disney stock, and I kind of laugh whenever we go to Disney. It's like, well, I actually own like 3 bricks on Main Street, right? And that's probably optimistic, to be honest. But nonetheless, I own a piece of that company. All right. And so the company does well. Hopefully I do well. That's not always true. Okay. But if the company does badly, I may lose all my money. It's just like owning a business, right? It's just you own it indirectly. All right. So that said, okay, what about, if I just said casino stocks are on a tear, is that good? Is it bad? And the answer is, well, it kind of depends. All right. So what people are doing here, the stock market is a psychological operation. All right. So what's going on here is that the price of a stock often has very little to do with what's happening right now. Okay. I mean, yes, immediate news has an effect. All right. Election results, depending on the company, may have an effect. All right. And so forth and so on. Massive flood hits your casino. All right. Yeah, that would have an immediate effect and would probably have an immediate effect on the stock. But for the most part, what's happening here is the price of a stock really reflects how people think the company is going to be doing a year or so in the future. And that year, it's a fuzzy period, guys. I'm not going to say a year is standard. All right, depends on the industry, depends on a lot of things. Just substitute year for future, and there you go. All right, the people that are buying stock are always thinking, how is this company going to be doing in the future? All right. So right now, for example, casinos are doing pretty horrible during COVID times, right? Because there's state regulations. You can't gather in large numbers. So even though these places have reopened, yes, they're not attracting as many people as they used to. All right. So they're not bringing in as much money. Now they've reduced their cost by firing people, basically laying them off. But nonetheless, they're stuck with these large buildings that they're trying to support, and the residual staff they're trying to support with a much less crowd that's coming in to gamble. All right, and we're not even going to talk about what happens with some of these casinos that were deriving half of their money, half of their revenue was coming for things that were not gambling. So the restaurants, the shows, all the stuff that kind of happens, at casino resorts that's not itself gambling. So a lot of that has gone away, right? It's the shows themselves are barely reopening and at such reduced capacity, there's no way they're making any money. All right. It's literally they're doing the shows just to pay the performers, and they're probably still taking a loss overall. It's more of a prestige thing to reopen right now. So economically, they're not doing very well, as companies right now. So why are there? I mean, some of my stocks cranked like 30% this last week. That's ridiculous, right? That's a ridiculous gain on essentially no significant news except the announcement that there might be a vaccine. Okay. Now this is not going to happen for months and months, right? We know this already. It's not going to be available for a long time yet. So what people in the stock market are doing is anticipating, all right? They're guessing that once we get a vaccine, once people are able to travel again, there's just going to be this flood of people heading into casinos ready to gamble and do all those other activities. All right. So it's a guess, if you want to call it that in the future, casinos will go back to something like normal, what they were before. And that's what's being reflected in the stock price, is that sort of anticipation. All right. Now, should you run out and buy casinos right now, casino stocks? To be honest, I wouldn't. Again, I'm not your fiduciary, right? I don't know your financial situation, right? So I can't give you direct advice on what to do and not to do. I'm just saying, as me, am I buying more shares? No. All right. Because I'm looking at that gain and I'm saying, is that supportable? All right. In the future, again, look to the future. All right. Are they going to be able to justify that? I've actually sold some shares because I'm looking at this going, no. All right. It's in the future. This is a pretty rich price to pay for this company, right? Knowing that it's all based on this hope that things go back to the way they were, all right, very shortly, all right, well, within months. So now is, to me, not a great time to run in and try to buy casino style stocks. I'd wait. You know, what are you waiting for? You're actually kind of hoping for some bad news. Well, that's depressing, right? But that's what casino. That's what investing generally is that you stand by and you wait for an event. You wait for some bad news, um, which is going to drive down the cost of your stock, right, to where the point where it may be worth buying it. All right. So to me, it's like I'm going to wait. We're going to see, and if the price goes down because things don't turn out as rosy as people say they are, then maybe I come back in and buy some more, or not. We'll see. Okay. So, anyways, didn't mean to talk about investing, but we did anyways. That's cool. What I wanted to talk about today, though, and we'll just do a little bit of this because we're going to come back to it, and that is as a companion, a non-gambler for the most part. How do you plan for a casino trip? All right. And this is going to depend very, very much, of course, on your circumstances, what your family's like, who's going. I mean, there's all kind of what your ages are. I mean, there's so many variables here, guys. It's not funny, but let's talk about just, okay, your companion wants to go off to a casino destination. We'll just say it's gonna be a destination. So we're not talking about a trip to your local casino, all right? The one that, is an hour away or 10 minutes away, and that it's just small and has machines and stuff, but doesn't offer too many amenities. We'll talk about that later. I mean, that's kind of a date night, right? We'll talk about that separate. This is like a trip. So you're going to go on a trip, maybe by car, maybe by plane, maybe by something else, but you're going to go to a casino destination. So you're going to a casino resort of some style. All right. And you'll probably stay overnight. You may stay for 3, 4, or 5, a week. You're going to stay for a while once you get there. Okay. How do you plan for that? All right. What's your planning? All right. Now, what I'm going to tell you guys is that planning for a casino trip is, what's the word? You should plan. and this is regardless of what your relationship is with your companion and who in your family tends to be the planner. Um, most likely, most likely in your family, uh, the gambler is the one who actually has to make all the big plans. Right? They're the one that's going to make the plans for where you're going to stay. All right. Why is that? Because they have that relationship, right, with the casino. All right. So they're the one that can get a free room or they can get reduced rate rooms. So this trip may technically not cost you anything as a family because they are going to be offered what are called comps, all right, which may be a free room or a reduced room, all right, among other things. And they may even have an offer of free food, which is good. You need to know about that. Okay. So that really means, guys, that your contribution to this is kind of minimal because it kind of depends on where your companion has benefits. Um, so there may be, uh, so for example, if you're going to Vegas, well, maybe your companion has um, a relationship with Caesars, the company is Caesars, uh, but they don't have one with MGM. Okay. Well, that means that your companion may be able to get really good rates or maybe free rooms at a Caesars property. And Caesars has like 5, 6 properties on the Vegas Strip. Um, so you might be able to stay at Paris or the Link or Caesars itself, the name brand. Okay, you might be able to stay at any of those for very reduced cost or free, which is great. But you can't stay at Mandalay Bay, right, which is literally down the road. But Mandalay Bay, which has a very good pool and stuff like that, that might have facilities that you're really interested in, but your companion's not going to get that because they're not a player for in the MGM system. All right, so they don't get those reduced benefits. They don't get the benefits down there. So you're going to get stuck going to places uh, that may or may not be what you want. Okay, but this is beyond your control. All right, to a large degree. So this is something which will be determined for you. So what I'm going to say, guys, is then you've probably going to be just maybe not told, but you're going to be given some options about where you can go. First part of your job as a companion, all right, is to start doing some research. All right. There's very, at least to me, it's very frustrating if you just literally go to a new place and you have no clue what's there. All right. And casinos are a confusing place. They're supposed to be. All right. They have lots of amenities, but they don't promote them all, okay, equally. And these are giant, enormous places. It's easy to get lost. So here's what I suggest you do as your first step. Once you know you got a trip coming up, first thing you should think about doing, well, a couple things you should think about doing. Um, Number one, what's the weather going to be like? You're like, why should that matter? We're going to a casino. We're always going to be inside in this dark, dingy place. Actually, no. As a companion, that may not be true. Okay, as a companion, you may be leaving the casino, going off and doing things. All right. In fact, I would highly, highly suggest that. So you need to know what the weather is going to be like. All right. So you can pack accordingly. Bring some sweatshirts if you need them. Bring shorts if you need them. Whatever you're going to need. Okay. But think about um, packing to suit the weather in case you get it. Um, at the same time, you also got to take into consideration um, packing for the indoor activities. All right. So casinos in general tend to have very, very, very good air conditioning, um, especially now in times of COVID where they're trying to increase the ventilation even more. So these places they tend to be cold. All right. Especially the large ones, they tend to be rather chilly. So even though the weather may say it's going to be 100 degrees while you're there, so you're thinking, well, I'm just going to run around in shorts and a t-shirt the whole time. Um, no, you're probably going to need to have a jacket, some kind of sweatshirt or something, unless you're just naturally one of those people who doesn't. Um, just because anytime you're inside, you're going to start getting cold if you spend any time at all inside. Okay, but your first big step, once you find out you're going, is to hit the internet. All right, and what I really recommend you do is, at the bare minimum, go to the resort's website, okay, and do a kind of a deep dive. All right, and this is bare minimum, guys. I am not saying this is the only thing you should do, but do a deep dive into what the resort promotes as being available. And this is actually especially true in times of COVID, when there are things that are closed and so forth, and hours are reduced. A lot of this is on the website, so you should really spend some time on there and figure out what kind of restaurants are available, all right, and their hours. So this way, you know what's available in terms of food throughout the day with easy access. That's just fundamental. And the reason for me comes back to gambling companions tend to be focused on gambling. So what will probably happen is you're going to hit about lunchtime or something. And they're going to say, "Are you hungry, honey?" And you're going to be like, "Sure." And then they're going to get all grumpy because you have no clue what's available, because it's not your kind of place, and they don't want to spend the time figuring it out either, because they'd rather be playing their games. Leads to domestic arguments. You don't want that, right? So instead, do your research, know what's available. Usually these places post menus, right? So you can go through, you can look at menus, get an idea on the prices, so that you can know right off the game, well, there's a relatively cheap pizza place somewhere here in the casino. You may not know exactly where it is, but at least you know its name and you know it's somewhere nearby. And once you got that in hand, you can probably find it. So to me, that's kind of key. Spend a little bit of time. And I do this on a routine basis. Even places I've been to before, I will go back, look at the websites, spend more time refamiliarizing myself with what's available. And this would especially be true if there are children involved. All right. If you got to feed kids, it is critical that you know what food is available at any given moment in time, as you probably already know. So be up on that. Okay. Make a list if you have to, put things on your phone if you have to, but be aware of all that stuff. Okay. And so already this can be a bit of a dive, right? Because now we're talking, that for a big casino resort, they may have a dozen restaurants that you actually have to go into. Now, some of them may be totally outside your ballpark. If this is just a quick family trip and you got kids involved, you're probably not going to a steakhouse. All right. So you probably can just throw away all those. But just in case, you should look at the menu, be aware of what's out there. You never know. So good. That's your initial thing you got to do. All right. And right now I'm just going to focus on restaurants. So good. You got that in mind. Now pull up a map. And come on, guys, it's the internet. There's maps everywhere. Pull up a map. What is your casino destination close to? All right. If we're talking about Vegas or Atlantic City or even Tunica, any of those kind of large or Gulf Coast, if we're talking about any of these large destinations, the odds are that your casino is not a standalone place by itself. There's probably surrounding it more casino destinations, more resorts. All right. So Vegas, of course, would be an extreme example of this. So if you're staying at, say, Paris, which is very nice, you actually have immediately adjacent to you, you basically, within easy walking distance, okay, you have 4 other resort, large, massive casino things, which are actually bigger than the Paris resort itself. Each one of them has its own slew of restaurants. All right. Okay. So your next job, start pulling up their websites. Well, that's not your first job. First job, familiarize with the terrain. And this is because in a lot of these places, it is so easy to get confused where the heck you're going. Right. And the last thing you want to do, especially if you got kids, is to walk 5 blocks in 100-degree heat, um, and then find out that you were actually going the completely wrong direction, and then have to turn around, fight your way through the crowds to get back to where you were. Um, it tends to lead to annoyed kids, all right, and companions. So don't do that. So familiarize yourself with the geography, all right? So know that, okay, if I walk out the door of Paris, then to the left is Planet Hollywood. To the right is going to be off toward the Link and those kind of places. And then Caesar's going to be across the street. That's all you got to know. And then you know basically the landmarks to look for because you know the resorts. So you're not going to get so much lost. You may still get lost, but it won't be horribly lost. And you'll be able to find your way around at least a little bit. Okay, so you familiarize yourself with what's available or in the surrounding area. Now, deep dive again. Restaurants. Go through resort by resort, what's available, look at menus, what's available in terms of prices, what is going to be most interesting to your companion, to whoever, whatever family members you are carrying along, especially if you have children, what's available in terms of quick snacks, and so forth. Things like that. Okay, good. So that's already a pretty deep dive. All right. Depending on the trip and how far you're going, it's actually worthwhile also to think about convenience. So this would be things like what kind of stores are nearby that would offer normal everyday items. All right. So, for example, in Vegas, very close to Paris, in fact, there are a couple of outlets that are conventional drugstores. All right. So CVS or whatever. There are some right on the strip, very within walking distance. There are a couple of these normal stores like you would have in your hometown, that offer all the usual stuff, not just medications, obviously, but beauty products, tons of candy, tourist stuff. So you can get this stuff fairly easily if you need it. And you may think that's not important, but again, if you've got to feed a small child, uh, and you're running around on your own, it may actually be important to know that. So being aware of what's going to be surrounding you, all right, is going to be good. That takes me to the second point. So you got the restaurants down. Do the same thing. Deep dive briefly what's available retail. The answer could be tons. All right. Again, within easy walking of the Paris destination, there is an entire mall. Okay. Literally, it's just down the street. There's an entire giant walking mall filled with stores. Now, most of it may have no interest to you. All right. It may be high cost luxury products or stuff you don't need, stuff you're not going to look at. But make a brief flip through those as well. Figure out what's available in terms of retail in that surrounding area, just so you are familiar. All right. And again, you're not surprised when you need something and so forth. All right. That brings you actually to what most people would say is the most important part. I started with what seems to be the least important. To me, it's not. If you're a companion, you need to know that stuff. But most important to most people would actually be, okay, well, what's available in terms of activities? All right, non-gambling activities. All right, now again, your companion probably cares mostly about the gambling. All right, so that's their focus. Your focus, not so much, right? So what's going to be available in that resort and nearby, because all those other resorts that may be of interest to you or your family, all right, or whoever you're traveling with is not a gambler, right? So This would include things like shows, all right? Um, it would also include uh, a whole bunch of exhibits. You know, there's museum style exhibits. There may be art things you can look at. There may be giant volcanoes you can go watch go off, all right, for free. All right. These are all things which, again, you should know about in advance, and especially because they may be on reduced hours. They may only be offered at certain times. The last thing you want to do is schlep a whole bunch of children uh, 20 blocks in high heat to go see something which only runs twice a day, and it's not going to happen for 5 hours after you get there, right? So that's not pleasant to you. It's definitely not pleasant to anybody else. So spend your time, research it, okay? And for this, the resort websites are fine. That's a good place to start. Um, but they may not ever, if it's something which they don't run, they may not even talk about it. All right. So the volcano thing in Vegas, it's wonderful, it's beautiful, but um, it is not part of Paris. All right. They don't run that. So you're not going to find advertising for that on the Paris website. So what are you going to do? The answer is, again, dive into it. There are always going to be a number of travel websites which will, you know, often they're trying to sell you tickets to things, and that's fine. Use them anyways. All right, just go through, get some details about information about attractions. So, for example, there is a Vegas.com website. They sell show tickets. I've actually used them for that occasionally, but they also give you reviews and guidelines, hours, prices for all these touristy type things you may want to do um, while you're at this destination. All right, and that's just for Vegas. Most of the other big destinations have something equivalent, which may or may not be as well developed, but um, there'll be something out there to do. So, what I've just said, guys, is that as a companion, this should be what you do. All right, you need to become a sort of expert on your places you're going. All right, and you may not be interested in the casino itself. You may not care, but you need to know what's around. All right, so, uh, and this is just for the purpose of domestic tranquility and happiness, right? That when you have people that are sitting around, they're hungry um, and getting grumpy, you can at least offer some guidelines. All right? I'm not saying it's going to solve the argument by any means. I am just saying it gives you a starting point, all right? A place where you can say, well, there's a burger place nearby and it's relatively cheap. That's a start, okay? Um, and that's, as a companion, what you're supposed to do, all right? Be there to give support. And yes, have some fun on your own. So as you go through this, guys, um, I didn't say it, but it should be obvious as you go through. Find things that appeal to you as well. Okay. So, yeah, focus on the restaurants that interest you, focus on the activities that might be of interest to you. Um, so, yeah, when the time comes up and somebody says, well, let's go out, get out of this casino and go do something, you can say, oh, well, there's this museum thing down the street that sounds interesting. Boom, you got something, you're ready to go. All right. So that's the first thing to do. Research it, guys. Um, and we may come back and talk more about that in the future. All right, guys. I blabbered on quite a bit for today. As always, go out there, have some fun, and yeah, be a good companion. See you next time.